Hello everyone, welcome to the Reloved Guitars again. I think I've got everything running. It's a Tuesday night and I've got Guy's Epiphone Dot here. Now I don't see many Epiphone Dots now. See a lot of 339s but not a lot of 335s. I've seen some Sheratons and things like that, but not the dots, So what do we have here? The semi-acoustic with the standard Epiphone black nut, which we're going to replace with one of these, an unbound fingerboard, Tuno-matic bridge, a jack socket which I had to replace because the other one had stripped, and 2 volumes, 2 tones, stop bar, scratch plate. Sort of, I think this one's got a centre block down the middle. I could be wrong, I don't know. I think it does. Yeah, I think it's got a centre block. So what am I going to do? Well, this is I kind of look on this as a fun setup, and by that I don't mean it gets any special light treatment, but what I mean by it is that it's fun in that it should be straightforward. The frets are pretty new. I've broken a string already, stretching them out, so I won't do any more of that stuff. But it should be straightforward, and it's straightforward in that as soon as you get a tusk nut on here and get the action lower and level out any kind of inaccuracies in the frets, you get a fantastic playing guitar out of it, which is quite transformed. At the moment this thing is about 2.5 millimeters action up at the top end here, and so it's got quite a bit of fret slap. So the aim will be to do 3 components of the setup: the neck relief first, and then the bridge action and the first fret action. So I think what I'll do straight away is I will do the nut part first. So let's come and zoom in on here, try and find room for things to fit. Oh, alright, let's have to reset that. Guy's trying to zoom in and he's gone and hit the off button because they're too close together, especially if you're using a mirror. Anyhow, so let's just get on. So I did the replacement of the jack socket first, and the reason for that was because it was a lot of fiddling around. I used a what's the thing, a big cable tie, and I doubled it over so it was a kind of spring at one end where it doubled over, and that held onto the jack socket, allowing me to pull it through into the hole, pull it up, get the nut on, and then when I was ready I could just pull out the doubled over thing, whatever it's called, cable tie. Right, so that was a pretty neat little problem solving. But on semi-acoustics it can be a pain when the jack socket comes loose, because it will, if you're not sure about it, or if you haven't done it before, you can get into quite a freak out trying to find the cable. You've got so little room to maneuver in. Finding the cable is quite difficult on its own. Okay, I'm going to leave the cover off because when we put the strings back on I'm going to want to be able to make an adjustment to the truss rod if necessary. So here we have the familiar old Epiphone nut. Now this should allow me to tap it off without any drama, he said. So I trust the way Epiphone make these things. Watch this, ready? Okay, so that's come free, and it doesn't seem to be stuck. Whoop, that's the glue breaking there. Okay, that's good. I'm trusting the Epiphone, the fact that they spray first, cut, and then cut the slot, which is a brilliant that's great that they do that way, because it makes it easy to remove. All you have to really do is break the glue seal, and they also tend to glue it by sticking glue on the front part of the nut as opposed to on too much on the bottom. There is some on the base of the nut, but it's not quite as much as some other manufacturers. Now I'm just noticing this isn't, even though I didn't pull up anything with it, this is a little bit uneven, so we're going to be replacing that with something that has to sit on there. Now I know I have to take a little bit of width off this nut, and I've done Epiphones before and they're very reliable in terms of knowing what I have to do. So we take some off the front edge, keeping it nice and flat, and then there you go, we're practically sat in there, and that is good to go. So we need just the tiniest bit of what do I need? Really, I could do with some very fine sandpaper. Yeah, we just need the tiniest bit of glue on the front face just to hold it there, but it's as good as done. There you go, nice fit, and then we'll just work up from that. So that's what I love about these Epiphones. So what I'll do after that is just I'll put a tiny bit of glue on that front edge, drop it into place. It fits perfectly well. It's already a 12-inch radius, suiting the fingerboard of this neck, which is a good standard thing. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on here like this, a bit over the edge there, and a little bit on there like that. Get that out the way. And then the secret then is to just get this in, a bit of a spill there, just get it down and in and flush before it sets off. There we go, lovely. Beaut. So now I'm going to restring, and then we'll check the relief and then make adjustments to the different actions. So like many people who bring guitars to me, Guy has watched my videos, so he knows the kind of basics of what I do, which is why he's chosen to bring it. But just to recap, I think what the characteristic of my setups is that the way I describe it is this: is that we set the playing action where we want it, regardless of what the frets have to say about the matter, and then we make the frets comply effectively. Now that's this is when these things are bent over, it's difficult to work with them. That's sounds a simple sentence to say, but actually it's quite a substantial difference to. Oh, God, I hate working with old strings, as you can tell. Bloody hurt. Yeah, it's a very simple thing to say. We set the action how we want. We make the neck or the frets comply with it. So the thing is that most guitars that you will have played, when you were growing up, sort of thing, your experience would be that the guitar comes to you playing or you set it when you get it as good as you can set it before it gives you all kinds of buzzing problems and so on and so forth. So really, it's a common experience that our playing action when we were but lads and lasses was dictated by the condition of the frets. That's basically what happens. And we didn't know it perhaps at the time, but all guitars have uneven frets, and some are more uneven than others. And the standard thing is, if you tell you what I should have done, I'm silly. If you keep your playing action above the height of the uneven frets, then they don't affect how you play. They're hidden by the high action. But most of us, when we got guitars, the first thing we wanted to do was lower the action and try and make them play easier. And as soon as we lowered the action, it's probably common experience to all of us that we found we ended up in a world of buzzing and choking out and so on. And so if we wanted the guitar to play, then we were forced to raise the action back up to a point where we got rid of the buzzers. And pretty much that's, believe it or not, what the factories do to this day. You know, they'll get a guitar off the production line. The guy on the setup bench will set it to a sort of an approximate playing action, and it's usually as low as it can go without there being undue buzzing and choking. And then when you run into those problems, you back off. And I think most manufacturers tend to avoid trouble, so they leave it quite high, because they don't want to, they don't want it to. I'm having trouble getting this stupid. This is a replacement E string. Yeah, so a lot of manufacturers will just leave a fairly high action because it's a safe zone out of harm's way. And then we get the guitar home and we want to lower the action, and then we try it and it gets all buzzy. And there are two kinds of buzzingness. There are more, but some of them are caused by loose components like tunematic bridge components. They can buzz. Loose truss rods can buzz, and pretty much any other component on the whole of the guitar can buzz sympathetically in resonate in sort of harmony with whatever is moving. But as far as frets are concerned, I tend to define two kinds of fret buzzing, and the one of them I call fret buzz, and one I call fret slap. The one I call fret buzz is when you encounter a high fret, and that high fret chokes off the next note, or the note you're trying to play doesn't play because the next fret's too high. That's fret buzz, and that's caused by either obviously uneven tall frets or low frets, and that's what we typically level frets for, to iron out those high peaks. And sometimes we have to bottom out low spots as well, so we're kind of constrained by, oh god, these strings are terrible. We're constrained by our playability is limited by sorry, I'm trying to do this, but this thing is insisting on, you get a little bit of leftover string, and all it ever does is it wants to scrape the blasted finish if it can. Yeah, so where was I? Leveling frets. You level out the high frets, and or you bottom out the low frets, and the low frets are as much of a problem, if not bigger, than the high frets. The high frets are quite simple to even out. The low frets, you have to level everything around it until you bottom that fret out, and everything's kind of at its level. So, but that's I'm losing track. That's what we do with fret buzz. So when I use fret buzz, I'm referring to individual high frets or low frets in particular places, but they're usually in one or two places on the neck. The other type of buzz that I refer to is what I call fret slap. A fret slap is where it's more where you've got clusters of frets, high and low. So it refers to the overall bumpiness of the neck. So standing back, rather than seeing just individual errant frets, which are often caused by the fret not being seated properly. Fret slap, where there are sort of hills and valleys, generally speaking, across the neck, and those hills steal away the extra bit of space that the strings need. You tend to find that when you have fret slap, you have buzz that goes most of the way, or half the way at least, up a single string, which is different from fret buzz, which is usually found in one particular place on any string, or one or two, but they're very distinct and relate to one fret usually. So fret slap is is where there is an undulation in the neck, and that is also cured by using the fret leveling technique that I use, but it's cured in a slightly different way. So instead of cutting down a single errant fret, which is perhaps not been hammered in properly and sticking up too high, the reason this little chunk here might have 3 or 4 high frets is because it's in a hillock in the overall topography of the guitar neck, and that is the result of a different problem, if you like. It's the construction or the behavior of the neck under loading of the strings. So the first one, we take the individual fret down, or we bottom out a series of frets to bottom out a particular low one. That's getting rid of fret buzz. To get rid of fret slap, we use the stiffness of the curve tool to gently impose its smooth curve onto the less than smooth curve, i.e. the bumpy topography of the neck. And funnily enough, it actually works. So you'll be able to hear it work, and that's what I like about this method as well. The fact that I can show you this working when we get to it. But just for the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to check the neck relief on here, and it's pretty small, so I'm going to leave it as is. Small being about 1/10 of a millimeter. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to reduce the playing action now at the far end, the last fret action. I'm going to take that down now to my target, and what we're going to expect to hear now is the noisiness of the frets is going to increase probably, and we might find ourselves getting choke outs at certain notes. We certainly don't expect it to play very nicely. If it was struggling a little bit before we lower it, it's going to be struggling even more afterwards. So I'm just going to retune it back up. Okay, now we're listening out for, it's typical tunematic bridge. So we've got another little problem here. This one's sticking up. I don't know why, but it's sticking up, and it isn't seated properly. And sometimes you find that with a tunematic bridge. It's a really crap design. It also means, in fact, this G is a little bit taller than all the others, so really it needs a little bit of a notch cutting in the top of the saddle, which is so annoying. Okay, so what I'm kind of expecting is to find deadish notes. So this fret slap all the way up there. Now, first thing, that isn't exactly what you might think it is. It's not frets causing that. It's now that we've lowered the action, it's actually hitting the pickups now at this height. So we can first of all take that down to get this a bit balanced out, so it may play a bit better than it was a minute ago. But I think we've still got a fair bit of the old fret slap, and that's usually what I find, that when we take the action down we usually end up facing a load of fret slap. And what I haven't tried out just now is a couple of bends. I'm kind of nervous about breaking the high E strings, but well, that's not bad. Again, I've been saying on recent videos that I'm quite impressed with the quality of the Epiphone frets. There's a lot of fret slap on these strings. They're struggling at that action, but the beauty of this system is that it's our job to make it play the way we want, so we can make any kind of tiny adjustments at the nut end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to level now using the StewMac U channel file, or banana as I like to call it. And the reason for that is that it's a little bit stiffer than the thinner ones, and this I'm not really doing this leveling with fret leveling in mind, or fret buzz in mind. I'm doing it with fret slap predominantly in mind. But what's interesting about this method is that it will straight away tell me what is going on with this neck. So we know that the first fret action is good now, we know the last fret action is good, we know the relief is already quite low and good. So now I'm going to go into the leveling process, and what we'll see straight away is that the banana tool, this thing, is very instructive in what it tells me about the condition of the underlying frets. So as soon as I start leveling, and I want to be leveling with really just kind of gravity, I'm not putting hardly any force into this. I just want this to go up and down under its own weight more than anything. And then the idea is I will then take a look at the fretboard and see what it tells me. I managed to wipe off a fair bit of the stuff. Okay, well, it's cutting pretty well. There's a sort of bit low there, high spot there, high and low right at the end. So everything's fairly even. Tiny low spot here, tiny low spot at the end. Not bad. Quite often you get 4 or 5 different patches, but this one seems to be pretty good. Now the question at this point in time is, we don't need everything to be 100% level. We just need it to play well. At the action that we've chosen. That harmonizes pretty well. So it's very good. I'm going to do a tiny little bit more, concentrating on perhaps this end, if anything. A couple of people who've recently bought my ebook and have been trying out this method I've asked a few questions about the type of truss rod. I've ended up settling with 2, and it's the pretty standard Squire Strat truss rod, which is got the key components of this is that it's very thin, which is good. It's reasonably stiff. It can of course bend. You can squeeze it closed if you try. It has quite a sensitive adjuster down here, which is good too. This one scores better in the fact that it's a little stiffer than the first one, and as a result it will hold its curved shape a little longer. So even if I press down a bit, it'll try and keep that curve a little bit longer. So I tend to switch between the two depending on how I'm feeling, and what you'll often find is that if I've got quite a lot of fret leveling to do first, I might well use the thin and more flexible Squire rod, but if I'm going straight to what is in effect leveling to reduce fret slap, I may go straight to the stiffer I might go straight to the stiffer, what do you call it, that thing, StewMac U channel. And the reason the U channel file is a little stiffer is the width of it, and it's got this, it's a box section aluminium, so it's kind of a stronger or a stiffer construction, that's all. But it's quite good that it keeps its shape, so that if I'm thinking that what I really want to do here is just map this curve gently onto this less than perfect bumpy surface, then if I keep this use this stiffer rod, then in a sense what I'm doing is I'm sort of leveling the whole lot in one go, really. Now on this G track here, I'm just going to have a little lookie. This is low still. Okay, low. So we've got 2 low spots, and it's sort of across the board. But like I said, it only matters the lowness. Ultimately, as long as it's below the action that we've chosen, it doesn't bother us. Tiny bit more, and then while I'm here, I'm going to just file a little tiny notch into the G saddle. I really hate Tune-o-matic bridges for this. They have some constantly finding these. Either first thing you have to check is to make sure that the little saddle is actually completely down in its cavity sort of thing, and if it is and it's still too high, then really you have to just go and do a small alteration with a file. So let me just find the file I'm going to use. I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to need to use a bit of sandpaper as well. So, and this is, I'm sort of really going to be doing this by eye. Well, it's slightly hard to tell because it looks like it's the G that's out of sequence, and I think that's about all I can really say about it. It has to be the G that's out of sequence, but the others could be pretty badly out of sequence as well. So it's just a bit of trial and error here. That's improved it. Yeah, I'll stop there. That's good. So just a little tiny adjustment to even it up, because it's just not good the way it was. And it offends mine eye. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to get a bit of 600 grit paper, and I'm just going to use the sharper edge of a blade and just put this in here, and just going to sand off the slot a little bit, just to give it as smooth a finish as possible, so we don't have any strings cutting. Good. That's that. Right, now we move on. Sorry, I'm moving things around. We move on to the D track. Now, with this guitar, this is where it's going to get a little challenging, because I know there's a lot of fret slap kicking in at this point for the action chosen. So I'm going to make this play without the fret slap, it's going to be a case of gently leveling it out. Now, just as a reminder, let's make it play on the D. So you have to kind of remember that as we get ready to level it. So this is, at this point, I really want, more than anything else, this to stay in shape. Right, so it's kind of important at this stage that I just, if I'm holding it anywhere, I tend to want to just guide it, but I want to hold it mostly in the middle, so that if it's contact, if I'm putting any pressure anywhere, it's more sort of in the middle than anywhere. But more than anything, I just want it to run up and down the frets, most of all under its own weight. And then we go back basically and listen and feel how it is now. Well, it's already better. See, if you just rewound, it's an old-fashioned word, but just taking that back a fraction, you'd hear that that's already fixed that. So that is the ability of this curved banana truss rod tool to map its smooth curve onto the bumpy topography of the the neck curve, and yes, it has to do that with a little bit of removal of fret metal, but it's the way it works. You know, we get a low playing, clean sounding action out of it, and that's what it's all about. This is the process of making the frets comply with our wishes. The amount of adjustment that I make on this tool is absolutely tiny, and it would be one of the things you have to learn yourself. It's incredibly small, but I kind of get it right. You get used to it. Now again, this is all about removing the fret slap, so I'm just going to, if anything, I'm just going to hold it mostly in the middle and let it do its thing. Don't mind that it's clattering, that's just when the end of the banana clips on the fret. It doesn't do any harm, it's just bumping over it. And there's a sort of whole business of feel, you know, when you get used to doing this, you sort of know when to stop, and you get a fairly good idea of when you'll be where you want to be. A little bit there. A little bit there, 12th, 14th fret. But it's clearing up, it's better than it was. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some more, gently up and down, and then I'm going to focus, in inverted commas, on the 14th fret. And all I mean by that is I'm just literally going to press down a little bit at the 14th fret, because I know that there's a little bit of unevenness here that I want to help on its way. There you go. Okay, a little tiny bit down the bottom end, so I'm going to pay that a little bit more attention, and then we'll be ready to move on to the low E. So, you know, you could look at this from every which angle and accuse it being of unscientific, and in some ways you're right, it is, but there is something about this principle that works, and as you get used to it, the decisions you make, like I'm making here, will appear to be a little bit sort of capricious, or even, you know, black magic-y at times. Why is he doing that? He's saying he's concentrating on that, but what does that mean? And what it really means is you just get used to putting maybe a little bit more pressure on where it needs, you feel like it needs it, you sort of intuitively know when it needs to stop. How do you know? Well, I can't tell you scientifically, I just, you know, it's experience, and then you stop and it's where you want it. So you do it again, you use the same intuition or tacit knowledge the next time you do it, and it works. So again, concentrating on fret slap, so I'm just letting this do its scooping work. I want to go right to the edge, so that quite often if there's going to be a problem, it can quite often be the frets right at the edge stick up a little bit too much, so it's sometimes you have to think about bringing the tool right to the edge to take care of that. Nice. Not bad, nearly there. I'm going to give it one more go. Sorry, accidental twangifications. One more go, and then we'll be done. Notice I turn the tool round. Don't ask me why, it just feels the right thing to do. So there are some things that I can't explain, but you'll get your own rituals, I suppose, when you learn to do it this way. The basic principle works really well. Okay. Now quite often, to eradicate fret slap on the lower strings, you will find that you have to do a little bit more leveling than in other places, because the strings move more in the lower bass strings. Oh yeah. Very nice. Happy with that. Okay. Whew. Right, next stage. Wash my hands in a minute, but next stage we get the strings off and we'll chuck these away. When you come to take the strings off on a adjustable nut, take the outside ones off first and leave the two middle ones till last. That stops any risk of the strings pinging the nut off one direction or the other. Oh my, these twisted little stumps get up my nose. So slack them off from outside inwards, and by the same token, when you're fitting the strings, new strings, which you'll see in a minute, we go from the middle outwards to pin the nut down first and then put the outside ones on. Okay, so that is the precision part of the fret leveling done, and that means that what's good about this system is that you could take the neck off if it was a bolt-on neck. You could do anything. You could change the body around. You could mess around with all kinds of things, and it will always, under loading, it will return to the same kind of configuration. When you put a set of 9s on it like this are back on, it'll return to where we had it, and it will play great because it's sort of going to remember that now. Whew, I think we're going to get some rain soon now. It's been the end of our summer. I know I go on about the weather, but today was properly, officially kind of the end of the nice weather, so I'm kind of used to the idea now that it's going to get a bit grotty from here onwards, but it'll be sort of a relief really to not have quite so much sticky heat in the evenings in this workshop, because that's really quite hard to live with. As you've seen on some videos, I'm like a wrung out dishcloth. I mean, not as clean or soapy. So what I'm just going to do here is I'm going to just take off some of the dust and stuff just to partly clean it off, but I'll do it again after we've done the fret sanding. This just gets some of the main grime off, softens it up. But next thing I'm going to do is to re-crown the frets. So we've now flattened them off a little bit, which is obviously what the process of leveling does to them. So next thing, I want to re-crown them so that they're more fret shaped like they were before we did any leveling. Again, this is all par for the course when you do this sort of thing. It's no surprise. But what we do is we use the StewMac recrowning tool, or they call it the fret crowning tool. They call it the offset diamond coated fret crowning tool. And so we mark up a load of marker pen on the fret tops again, and then I will basically go along with this concave tool and round off the shoulders, if you think of it that way, as the flat edges of these frets where I've leveled them. So you can probably see me, same old view every time. I'll do the first view in close up. So I get the medium side of this and I let it just cut away any sharp edges, and it rounds them off, and so that flat spot becomes more of an arch form again, the way it's meant to be. And we go up and do all of them the same way. Now what you'll probably see in this is I do hardly any re-crowning all the way up this, despite it kicking up a fair bit of dust while we're doing it. It's the amount of time this takes that tells you ultimately how hard you've had to hit the frets and how much metal you've had to take off. And you can probably, well, I can tell you, this is a very quick run through by comparison to many I've done. So this one's got a bit more to come off, so I've obviously leveled this one a little bit harder, and that would have been a higher fret in the sequence. So and this one as well. Falls off the board. So I had to slow down for a couple there, but not so much. So once I've done this, what I'll do is mask off the fingerboard, and basically off camera I will sand out the frets, going through a whole series of papers from 400 grit to 600 to 1000 to 1500, and then switching to micro mesh pads and go from 1500 to 12,000 in usually 9 steps. Although they've changed it around now, the ones that used to sell 9 steps seem to only sell 6 steps now and charge the same amount of money. So Brexit for you, amongst all those other things. So you can see these low frets at the end here I hardly touched with the leveling file, so I'm really hardly doing any recrowning work at all, maybe just a little bit on the bass edge. Okay, so that's that done. So the next stage will be to mask these off, and I'll do that, and basically I'll come back to you in a little while when I've got this all polished out and we're ready to restring and do the intonation. So this, as you can see, this is there's a couple of little things I've obviously done off camera. First of all being fixing the jack socket, the other thing being prepping the adjustable nut. But apart from that, you know, and then obviously this sanding process is going to be off camera because it's just boring and noisy and sweaty. But that's what I like about these. There's a dependable kind of outcome with these, and the little details that I pick up along the way, like needing to do a tiny notch, deepen the notch on that G string, because they're crude. The Tunematic bridge is just a very crude device. I'm sorry, I don't like it, and I don't like it for good reason. It's a naff design. What I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on with this. I've got some special thin stuff, and then eventually I'll have to go to my board of ready cut thin bits to do the little ends down here. Yeah, the Tunematic bridge is an awful bit of design, I have to say. It's 1950s at its worst, and it's just crude. It hasn't got enough room really for intonation travel, or it has enough room, but it's very unforgiving on bridge placement. So if the manufacturer, or you, if you're building a guitar, if you get it a millimetre out of place in any direction, you will struggle to make it work. If it's a millimetre or two out of place front to back, you will find yourself running out of intonation room because there just isn't enough on the individual saddles. They're very limited in movement, and there's no good reason for it. They're just shallow from front to back, or narrow from front to back. Could have been wider, and some of the really early ones were, and some variants on old guitars like Arias and Ibanez's and stuff had much deeper bridges with a lot more room for saddle adjustment, which you know, allowed makers a much greater leeway of making positioning. Well, I say mistakes, but actually if you're not using a CNC machine, you're doing things by hand, getting the bridge in exactly the right place is a surprisingly difficult thing to do. You know, a standard bridge, two-post Tunematic style bridge, has to have, you've got no more than 0.5 millimetre drilling tolerance for the centre of the post. So if your drill bit wanders even the tiniest fraction, and you're a fraction off, sorry, you probably can't see anything now because I'm probably horribly looking the wrong way. Yeah, if you're even so much as 0.5 millimetre off, your posts will be pointing or be too far apart, and they'll stiffen up as you try and tighten the bridge down. Or if your post holes or any posts will spread, and you'll end up trying to trying to hammer your bridge onto the posts that really don't want to go together because they're trying to diverge. So there's all manner of unforgivingness, and that's why when I talk about, if you're going to make your first guitar, make one around, devise one around a Strat style bridge if you can help it, because that gives you a huge amount of forgiveness and tolerance in terms of making mistakes and moving things around a little bit. And it's all very well to set yourself a tough goal and say, well, you should be able to get it within 0.5 millimeters. Well, I promise you, 0.5 millimeter, even with an averagely good pillar drill, which isn't 2,000, 3,000 quid's worth, you'll have a little bit of wonder in the chuck. It's not precision engineering. It's fairly good, but you'll still get a tiny little movement sometimes, and you get that involved in your two-posted tunematic bridge, and you'll find yourself not being able to fit the bridge, and all manner of misery going on. So, like I say, if you're going to choose to build a guitar, give yourself a head start and build one with windy Strat style bridge on it for starters, because if you get it wrong, you can pick it up and you can move it around and put it somewhere else. And of course the great thing is that in doing so, the position of the bridge where you put it down covers your tracks, if you like. So if you make a mistake, thankfully that gets covered by your replacement of the bridge. That doesn't happen with a tunematic bridge. That tends to leave you showing your error of your ways, i.e. you can see the remains of the first holes you drilled, even though you've filled them and drilled some more to move the bridge, because that's all you can do. It still shows you, it shows up where you made the mistake, so it's very unforgiving. So I say don't make it necessarily hard on yourself. Right, so that's me what's it. I'm going to just put some masking tape over here to protect the edges of the finish, where the sandpaper may kind of come into contact with it. Masking tape, cheap and cheerful, so use more of it rather than less is my motto. Okay, and then I'm going to go off and listen to some radio while I do this mind-numbingly boring part of the process. What I'll also do, by the way, I'll throw that in the bin, because no, I'll miss the bin. I'll also stick some frog tape on here to cover the end one, because that tends to come off too easily, but also to protect the pickup as well, because you don't want it sandpaper cutting through there. And some people get funny, they go, oh, you should cover up the pickups. Promise you, the dust from fret polishing doesn't migrate to the pickups. No matter what you think, it is barely magnetic to begin with, and it certainly isn't magnetic enough to migrate, but people get upset. Okay, I'm going to make myself a set of papers across the range, and when I've done the boring stuff, I will come back to you with, it should take about half an hour of sanding. I might make a cup of tea or something along the way, so that I'll be fully refreshed for the final bit, which will be restringing, stretching out and sanding. No, stretching out, and what's the final thing? Intonating, or checking the intonation. So I'm just looking at my thing here. It says it's 25 degrees still in here, which is not surprising. But it's also saying it's 47 degrees. That's about as low a humidity as I've seen in here ever. But I think it's the last time we're going to see low humidity for a long time. So luckily I don't have any urgent finishing that I have to do, which is just as well, because I don't think we're going to see nice weather for a while. Could be wrong. Anyway, right, time to switch off. See you in a minute. Well, I managed not to put this camera on the whole first part of the video. But anyway, here we are. Frets leveled, polished out. I don't even know what I'm looking at down here. Come along. Yeah, okay, good out, long view. Frets polished and leveled, polished, etc. Cleaned up, fretboard oiled, and we're now fitting, wow, new strings. Dario 9s, and that'll be. So off camera, while I was doing the what do you call it, polishing, I allowed myself the guilty pleasure of a load of Beatles love songs. Ah, and I soppy though it may sound, I still love them. I really do. Beautiful songs. And I suppose there was a time, you know, when you go through your youthness, and I reckon there's a time where certain things become really uncool, you know, and liking Beatles love songs, Paul McCartney, John Lennon love songs, kind of became uncool. A bit like so did ABBA. Liking ABBA became uncool at some point. And actually, I really love the fact that 3/4 of the globe secretly admits to loving ABBA, if the truth be known, you know. And it's just one of those things that why do we spend so much of our time pretending that we don't like something because it's, you know, we're worried that it's so uncool, and we should be liking something hip and edgy, when in fact what we really like is a beautiful, sweet, sickly sweet melody. So I suppose I've lived long enough now for it to become acceptable to like ABBA. It's almost the cool thing to do now, especially when they're coming out with a new album and a sort of virtual stage show or something. But anyway, so yeah, all those years of pretending or feeling bad because thinking you're going to be judged by others as being somehow uniquely naff if you admit to liking ABBA. What beautiful songs they were as well. So kick myself that I would ever, you know, kick myself that as kids, some of us were too busy worrying about what other people thought of us, you know, all that self-obsession business, you know, you're too busy worrying about what people thought to be ourselves, really. And that I find that's a shame. And I would certainly, if I had my time again, I wouldn't shape myself around what anybody else, or around anything that I thought other people thought. You know, that whole thing is all in your head anyway. My advice to my younger self would be, get on and do what you bloody well like, and don't apologise to nobody. That's what I would say in a folk's northern accent. But yeah, you know, it's such a shame to have wasted any time on it, thinking, oh, I shouldn't like that, or it's so uncool. Or I had a friend, he's dead now. I knew him in the 80s, and we hung out a lot together, and worked together, and lived together a bit. And he was, I might have told this story before, but he was beautiful, pretty boy, and he was so cool and elegant and stylish, and, you know, he was the cover of the magazine, you know, the sort of hip, trendy kid on the cover of the sort of, you know, the sort of with it trendy magazine type of looks. And I was the sort of uncool friend, and he liked all this really cool stuff, and I liked this really naff old predictable Beatles and Pink Floyd, and, you know, and that's how I judged it, you know. And I thought he was so damn cool and I was so uncool, and he was into Echo and the Bunnymen and the Smiths, I think, or was that a bit before then, or Japan, and, you know, all these very very stylized music that was as much style as it was music. And I just remember the whole time feeling inadequate because he was so cool and I was so naff by comparison. It's just such a waste of time. And yeah, I lost kind of contact with him when we sort of moved away from the 80s, as it were. And then years later I spotted some sort of obituary thing, or comments in memoriam page, and yeah, he died in those intervening years. Never quite sure what from. I know that I think he went to Japan and married a Japanese lady in his, I guess it must have been his late 20s and maybe into his 30s. But then he died while he was out there of something. Nobody ever said in the memorial sort of pages, and I never found out. But it's very odd to find out that somebody who spent a hell of a lot of time with kind of gone. Without a whisper. Yes, so that was odd, but yeah, the thing that characterised our time together was I was the sort of boring grown-upper one, and he was the edgy, exciting, go-getty, younger, fashionable one, and it was just, I gave myself such a hard time about being so boring compared to his edgy tastes. And yet you can't sort of undo what you are, you can't sort of undo the fact you like ABBA, even though somebody's telling you it's the naffest thing, and laughing at you in the way that really bites. But there you are. Spend so much of your life not being self-assured. Maybe sometimes you only arrive at that place when you're much older, when it's you kind of wish, God, why couldn't I have had that self-awareness and self-assurance when I was that clumsy 18-year-old? Of course, it isn't the way it works. It just ain't. Right, pretty much stable on the tuning. Could do with a bit more stretching, but we're not far off. Now the next main thing to take care of now is that thing that's called intonation. Oft misunderstood thing, the intonation. It's a matter of distance. doesn't really matter if you do it with a guitar lying down, because the change in distance is minuscule. Well, the intonation is set right on this, which is good. It's good, set right. Now, let's have a look. Let's try the E first. Yeah, the thing about intonation is, it's pretty well set actually. The thing about intonation is that people get really uppity about how you do it and the accuracy, and some people insist you should have a very expensive digital tunery oscilloscope thing or whatever, and the more money you spend on your tuning devices, the more serious you obviously are. But I try to keep a sense of perspective on it, because if you think about things, the biggest variable in the whole equation of your intonation checking is how hard you press the string down, right? Right? I can press it harder than you, you can press it harder than me. So the biggest variable is how hard you press the string down, and because of that, that variable is constantly changeable. So no two of us ever do it the same, and I probably never do it the same twice in a row. So it kind of makes a bit of a joke, the idea of having expensive tuning equipment when there's nothing about, when the biggest variable in it all is the way that you squeeze it with your bare hands. So I think it, if you ever get too, what was that clicking? If you ever get too sort of stuck in too far into it and start to mistake reality for myths for reality, just remember that no two people even squeeze the note the same. So what's the point of having all that expensive tuning equipment when two people will squeeze the whole thing differently and put a different pressure on the notes. There you go, that's spot on. I like it, it's done, it's ready. What I'm going to do now is just lightly affix the little hex key that goes with this. That goes with the adjustable nut. The adjustable nut stands on the 3D printed base, and I always flatten off the feet using, I sand the feet down a little bit, or the grub screws, so they flatten out so it spreads the load a bit. But occasionally it might be that it needs a tiny tweak months down the line, and that can be done via the adjustable thingy right there. Ta-da. So, and you can see you can make a very, very small upward movement to increase or decrease the playing action as is desired. So here we have it, 1.5 millimeters at the last fret, no buzzing, choking, and no fret slap, or hardly any fret slap. We got rid of, I think, almost all of it, if not all of it. Jack socket replaced with a stronger one. That's a quality all parts one. A tiny notch deepened on the G string because it was off, as it often is. And yeah, everything done. Lovely, ready to go. Thanks for watching. Sorry about the missing video view in the first half, but see you soon for another exciting setup. Bye for now.